They branded me the black sheep because I refused to fight for scraps, never suspecting I had already bought the farm and held their mortgage. When Mom declared my brother deserved the entire estate, she did not just sign a will. She signed the death warrant for her hollow business empire. $5.1 million vanished with a single mouse click, and that was merely the appetizer for the devastation to come. My name is Alice Hargrave, and I sat in the sterile, air-conditioned silence of my Chicago penthouse, watching my family prepare to cut my throat. The camera on my laptop was a $4,000 lens, capturing every pixel of my minimalist workspace. Behind me, the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the skyline, currently draped in the gray wool of a mid-morning fog. There were no personal photographs on my desk, no clutter, no knickknacks, just the sleek aluminum of my hardware and a single ceramic cup of black coffee. It was a fortress of solitude I had built with precision. On the screen, the feed from Boston was grainy by comparison. Despite their wealth, they were gathered in the library, a room I had not set foot in for 3 years. I could smell that room just by looking at it, a mixture of old paper, lemon furniture polish, and the stale, metallic scent of pretension. The walls were lined with books nobody read, bound in leather that was cracking from age and neglect. My father, Robert, sat at the head of the mahogany table. He was wearing a 3-piece suit, even though it was a Saturday. His posture was rigid, a statue of patriarchal authority that was slowly eroding around the edges. Next to him sat my mother, Victoria. She was draped in cashmere, her neck weighed down by a string of pearls that were a little too large to be tasteful. She kept touching them, her fingers fluttering like nervous moths, checking to make sure the wealth was still there. And then there was Julian. My brother sat on the edge of his seat, leaning toward the camera lens, as if he were trying to charm the internet connection itself. He was 35 years old, yet he still carried himself with the frantic energy of a teenager trying to hide a report card. He was handsome in the way a magazine advertisement is handsome, symmetrical, polished, and completely devoid of depth. He wore a navy blazer that cost $2,000 and a watch that cost $20. He kept shooting glances at his wrist, checking the time on that garish chronograph, creating an air of a man who had important places to be. I knew better. I knew exactly where Julian spent his time, and it certainly wasn't in boardrooms. "Can you hear us, Alice?" my mother asked, her voice shrill. The audio feedback whined for a second. "The connection seems unstable. You really should invest in better internet if you are going to work in whatever digital field it is you dabble in." "I can hear you perfectly, Mother," I said. My voice was calm, leveled. I did not raise my pitch to match hers. I did not smile. I simply observed. Sitting awkwardly at the far end of the table in Boston was Mr. Thompson, the family attorney. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. He was shuffling papers, his hands trembling slightly. He knew what was coming. He also knew it was wrong. But Thompson was a man who billed by the hour, and the Hargraves had been paying his firm for 40 years. He cleared his throat, a dry, rattling sound. "Shall we begin?" Thompson asked, looking over his spectacles. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Ms. Josephine Hargrave, Aunt Josephine, the only person in that family who had ever looked at me and seen a human being rather than a disappointment." The news of her death had hit me hard, a dull ache in the center of my chest that I had not allowed to show on my face. She had died of cancer 3 weeks ago. I had not attended the funeral. My parents had told me it would be better for everyone if I didn't cause a scene, claiming my presence would only remind people of my estrangement. "Proceed," my father commanded. Thompson lifted the document. Josephine was quite clear in her instructions. Her estate is substantial, primarily consisting of liquid assets which have already been distributed to various charities as per her wishes, and one significant real estate holding, the commercial warehouse complex at the South Boston waterfront. I took a slow sip of my coffee. The liquid was cold. I didn't mind. "The current market valuation of the waterfront properties is approximately $6 million, Thompson continued. I saw Julian's eyes widen. It was a micro-expression, lasting less than a quarter of a second, but on my high-definition monitor, it was as clear as a billboard. His pupils dilated. His tongue darted out to wet his lower lip. It was the look of a starving dog seeing a steak. He shifted in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. "Regarding the disposition of this property," Thompson began. "Wait," my mother interrupted. She held up a hand, palm facing the camera, silencing the lawyer. It was a gesture of supreme entitlement. She turned her gaze to the lens, staring directly at me. "Before we read the formalities, I think it is important to establish context. For the record, Victoria, the will is quite specific." Thompson tried to interject. "Context, Mr. Thompson," she snapped, her voice dipping into that dangerous, icy register she used on waitstaff and housekeepers. She turned back to the camera, her face softening into a mask of tragic nobility. "Alice, you have been away. You don't know the reality of the situation here. For the past 5 years, while you were in Chicago finding yourself, Julian has been the rock of this family." I blinked. "Once. Is that so?" "It is," she insisted. She reached out and placed her manicured hand over Julian's. He looked down at her hand, then back at the camera, practicing his mournful expression. "Julian has been managing the warehouse complex tirelessly. It is a thankless job. The maintenance, the tenants, the endless paperwork. He has kept your aunt's legacy alive with his bare hands. It's been challenging," Julian added, his voice dropping an octave to sound more masculine, more burdened. He sighed, a heavy exhalation of fabricated exhaustion. "Just last week, I had to drive down to the docks at 2 a.m. A pipe burst in Unit 4. The tenant was screaming, threatening to sue. I had to handle it personally because the contractors wouldn't pick up. It's a grind. Alice, it's not like sitting behind a computer screen all day. It's real work, blood and sweat." I watched him lie. It was fascinating. I knew for a fact that Unit 4 had been vacant for 8 months. I knew this because I was the one paying the property taxes on the building. I knew there was no burst pipe. I knew that at 2 a.m. last week. Julian had been at a private poker table in a basement in Cambridge, losing $4,000 on a pair of jacks. But I said nothing. I let the silence stretch, forcing them to fill it. "He has sacrificed his youth for this family," Mother continued, her eyes glistening with performative tears. "He could have gone anywhere, done anything, but he stayed. He served." My father cleared his throat, signaling that he was ready to deliver the verdict. He looked straight into the camera lens. His eyes were cold, hard flint. There was no love in them. There wasn't even anger anymore, just a profound, weary disappointment. "Alice," he said, "we have discussed this at length with Mr. Thompson. We believe that fairness is not about equal division. It is about equity based on contribution." "Contribution," I repeated the word flatly. "Yes," Father said. "You chose to leave. You chose to move to Chicago to pursue this freelance career of yours." He said the word freelance, the way one might say prostitution or drug dealing. Designing websites, odd jobs, living paycheck to paycheck, it is a lifestyle choice. And we respect that it is your choice. But it means you have not been here. You have not contributed to the legacy of Hargrave Logistics. "I see," I said. "Julian has been the acting manager of the warehouses for 5 years." Father continued. "He understands the business. He understands the tenants. He is the future of this family." Thompson looked down at the will in his hands, then back at my father. "Robert, the will actually states—" "The will," Mother cut in again, loud and sharp, "was written 10 years ago. Josephine was not in her right mind at the end. She would have wanted the property to go to the person who actually cared for it. We are executing the estate according to the family's best interests, which supersede an outdated document. This was legally dubious at best, but I knew what they had done. They had pressured Thompson. They had likely threatened to pull the Hargrave Logistics retainer if he didn't facilitate this interpretation. Or perhaps they had produced a codicil, a newer forged amendment. It didn't matter. So, I said, leaning back in my chair, what is the bottom line? Father straightened his tie. The bottom line is that Julian will inherit the entirety of the waterfront warehouse complex. Furthermore, your mother and I are transferring our controlling interest in Hargrave Logistics to him. Effective immediately. The warehouse assets will be leveraged to provide the capital injection the company needs to expand. Julian puffed out his chest. He looked like a rooster who had just won a fight he didn't know was fixed. It's a heavy responsibility, he said solemnly. But I'm ready to take it on. For the family. And me? I asked. Does Aunt Josephine leave me anything? Thompson shifted uncomfortably. There was a mention of a collection of porcelain cats, and a request that you be given her vintage sewing machine. Silence filled the digital void between Chicago and Boston. $6 million in commercial real estate for Julian. A sewing machine for me. My mother offered a smile that was meant to be comforting but looked more like a grimace. It's fair. Alice, truly. Think about it. Julian needs the capital. He has a business to run. He has a reputation to uphold. You have your freedom. She paused, and then she delivered the blow she had been saving. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if she were giving me advice for my own good. Besides, darling, she said, you are 32 years old. You don't need commercial real estate. You need a husband. If you spent half as much time socializing as you do staring at that computer, you might have found someone to take care of you by now. A woman shouldn't have to worry about property management. It's unseemly. I looked at them. Really looked at them. I saw the fear behind my father's arrogance. The fear that his company was failing and he needed Julian's inheritance to plug the holes in the ship. I saw the desperation in Julian's eyes, the knowledge that he was in debt up to his eyeballs, and this inheritance was the only thing keeping his legs from being broken by loan sharks. I saw the vanity in my mother, the need to maintain the illusion of the perfect, wealthy dynasty, even if she had to cannibalize her own daughter to do it. They looked at me, expecting a fight. They expected the black sheep to bleat. They expected Alice, the emotional, unstable freelancer, to scream about fairness, to cry, to threaten a lawsuit they knew I couldn't afford. They were braced for a tantrum. It was what they wanted. A tantrum would validate them. It would prove that I was immature, that I was unworthy, that I was exactly who they said I was. I felt a cold calm wash over me. It was the same sensation I felt when I executed a complex piece of code and watched the lines of data align perfectly. I reached out and picked up my coffee cup again. I took another sip. I looked directly into the camera lens, making eye contact with the digital ghost of my brother. Okay, I said. The word hung in the air. Julian blinked. Okay? Yes, I said. I understand. Julian has worked hard. He deserves the warehouse. He deserves the company. I accept the decision. My mother let out a breath she had been holding. Her shoulders dropped 3 inches. Oh, Alice, thank goodness. I knew you would be reasonable eventually. I am very reasonable, I said. A small, thin smile touched my lips. It didn't reach my eyes. I hope the warehouse brings Julian everything he has coming to him. It will, Julian said, grinning now, the relief flooding his face, making him look greasy. I've got big plans, Alice, big plans. You'll see. I'm sure I will, I replied. Well, Father said, clapping his hands together, eager to end the call now that the robbery was complete. That went better than expected. We will have Thompson send over the paperwork for you to sign, waiving your claim to the estate. Send it over, I said. I'll sign it digitally. Good girl, Father said. Goodbye, Alice, Mother said, already turning away to signal the maid for champagne. Try to get out of that apartment this weekend. Find some sunlight. Goodbye, Mother. Goodbye, Julian. I reached forward and pressed the red button to end the call. The window closed. The grainy image of the Boston Library vanished. replaced instantly by the crisp, high-resolution desktop of my computer. I sat there for a moment in the silence of my penthouse. The only sound was the low hum of the server rack in the hidden closet behind the wall. They thought I was weak. They thought I was a pushover. They thought they had just secured their future. I swiveled my chair around to face the other monitor, the one that had been running in the background during the entire call. It displayed a live dashboard of Ether Systems, the global supply chain AI consulting firm that had quietly revolutionized logistics in the Midwest 3 years ago. The user interface showed a net worth graph, my net worth graph. It hovered just over $200 million, and in the bottom right corner of the screen, there was a smaller window. It was a live security feed, not from my apartment. It was a live feed from the security cameras at the South Boston waterfront warehouses. The cameras Julian thought were broken. I watched a seagull land on the roof of Unit 4. I saw the peeling paint. I saw the empty parking lot. And I saw the digital deed of trust, titled to Blue Jay Holdings, dated 18 months ago. My family had just disinherited me from a property I already owned. They had just handed my brother a company that was technically insolvent, and they had just insulted the only person on the planet who had the liquid capital to save them. My mother was right about one thing. It was time for Julian to get everything he deserved. I opened a command terminal on my screen. The cursor blinked, green and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. I typed a single command, initiate_protocol, clean_slate. I didn't need a husband. I didn't need a legacy. I needed another cup of coffee. The game had just begun. The screen went black, severing the digital tether to Boston. I exhaled, a long, controlled breath that fogged the air in front of me for a brief second before the climate control system scrubbed it away. I stood up and tapped a sensor on the edge of my desk. The wall behind me, which my family assumed was the drywall of a modest apartment, hummed with a low vibration. It was smart glass. Slowly, the opacity faded, transforming from a solid white barrier into a crystal-clear pane revealing the bustling operations floor of Ether Systems. Dozens of analysts and data engineers moved silently in the open-plan office below, bathed in the cool blue glow of server status monitors. They were tracking shipping containers in Singapore, optimizing trucking routes in Germany, and predicting supply chain disruptions in Brazil before they even happened. This was not a freelance gig. This was the nervous system of modern logistics, and I was the brain. I walked to the edge of the mezzanine, looking down at the empire I had built from nothing but code and spite. My father called it a vague digital hobby. The market called it a $2 billion valuation unicorn. It was almost funny. If Robert Hargrave knew that the ether in Ether Systems was the same daughter he had just disinherited for being unproductive, he would have had a stroke right there at his mahogany table. But he did not know. No one knew. My name did not appear on public filings. I hid behind a labyrinth of shell companies, blind trusts, and proxy directors. To the world, the CEO of Ether was a man named Marcus Thorne, a brilliant figurehead I paid handsomely to shake hands and give keynote speeches while I pulled the strings from the shadows. It was a habit I had picked up early. Never let them see what you are holding until the game is already won. I walked back to my desk and sat down, the leather of my Herman Miller chair creaking softly. My mind drifted back 14 years, to the day the bridge burned. I was 18. I had been accepted into MIT for computer science. My father had thrown the acceptance letter into the fireplace. He told me that Hargraves were lawyers, or they were nothing. He told me that if I walked out that door to pursue computer games, I would do it without a penny of his money. He thought poverty would break me. He thought that after a month of eating ramen noodles, I would come crawling back, ready to enroll in law school and marry a junior partner from his firm. He miscalculated. I spent my freshman year smelling like stale grease and industrial sanitizer. I washed dishes at a diner from 6 in the evening until 2 in the morning. I slept 4 hours a night. I attended lectures with cracked hands and red eyes. But while I scrubbed plates, my mind was writing code. I saw patterns where others saw chaos. I realized that the economy was just one giant, inefficient algorithm waiting to be optimized. When I was 24, I wrote a piece of software that predicted trucking delays based on weather patterns and traffic data. I sold it to a logistics giant for $300,000. That was the seed capital. I reinvested every cent. I did not buy a car. I did not buy a house. I lived in a studio apartment the size of a closet and ate peanut butter sandwiches while I built the next iteration. By the time I was 28, Ether Systems had secured its first government contract. Now, at 32, my personal net worth hovered just north of $200 million. Yet, whenever I returned to Boston for the holidays, I played the role they wrote for me. I rented a battered Chevrolet Spark from the airport. I wore jeans I bought at a discount store. I complained about rent prices and hinted that I was struggling to find clients. It was a test, a cruel, scientific test to see if they loved me or if they only loved what I could provide. The results were statistically significant. They treated me with a pity that bordered on disgust. They seated me at the end of the table. They interrupted me. They gave me gift cards for grocery stores as Christmas presents, while Julian received vintage scotch and tailored suits. Julian. I tapped my keyboard, bringing up a new window. It was a dossier on my brother. My parents saw a dutiful son. Aunt Josephine had seen a parasite. Josephine was the only one who had bothered to look closely. She was the only Hargrave who had invited me to lunch without checking her watch. She was a sharp woman, a spinster who had amassed her own fortune through shrewd real estate investments, independent of my father's law firm. She respected intelligence, and she had smelled the fraud on Julian years ago, 2 years before she died. Josephine had asked me to look into the books for the waterfront warehouse complex. She had a feeling something was wrong. The profits were dipping, yet the occupancy was full. I remembered that afternoon vividly. We were sitting in her sunroom, the tea cooling on the table between us. I had opened my laptop and hacked into the bank accounts Julian was managing for her. It took me less than 10 minutes to find the hemorrhage. Julian wasn't just bad at business. He was a criminal. He had created phantom maintenance companies. Boston Roof Repair, Harbor Plumbing Services, Elite Security Solutions. They were all registered to a PEO box in the Cayman Islands that I traced back to Julian's personal laptop. He would invoice the warehouse for repairs that never happened, pay the fake company from Josephine's account, and then funnel the money into online gambling sites. He had stolen $450,000 in 3 years. I remembered the look on Josephine's face when I showed her the transaction logs. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just went very, very still. "He thinks I am a senile old woman," she had said, her voice trembling with a cold rage. "He brings me flowers on Sunday and robs me on Monday." "I can go to the police," I had offered. "No," Josephine had said, placing her hand on mine. Her grip was surprisingly strong for a woman in her 80s. "If we go to the police, your parents will bail him out. They will hire the best defense attorneys. They will spin a story about how it was a misunderstanding, or how I gave him permission. He will learn nothing." "Then what do we do?" "We let him think he has won," she whispered. "And then we take the floor out from under him." 18 months ago, Josephine and I executed the maneuver. It was a beautiful piece of legal engineering. Josephine created a revocable living trust. She named it the Blue Jay Trust, after the birds we used to watch in her garden when I was a child. Then, she executed a deed of trust. She transferred the title of the South Boston warehouse complex, all 6 units, the land, and the riparian rights, out of her personal name and into Blue Jay Holdings, a limited liability company fully owned by the trust, and the sole beneficiary of the Blue Jay Trust was me. The brilliance of the move was in its silence. Property transfers are public record, but unless you are actively looking for them at the Registry of Deeds, you won't notice. Julian was so busy skimming off the top that he never bothered to check the foundational paperwork. He assumed that because he had the keys and the bank login, he controlled the property. Josephine's will, the one Thompson had just read with such gravity, was valid, but it was toothless. It bequeathed the warehouse to Julian. Yes, but you cannot bequeath what you no longer own, at the moment of her death. The warehouse was not part of her estate. It belonged to Blue Jay Holdings. It belonged to me. I looked at the live security feed of the warehouse again on my screen. I saw Julian's Porsche pull into the lot. He stepped out, phone pressed to his ear. Looking up at the building he thought was his golden ticket, he was likely calculating how much he could borrow against the equity. He was probably already spending the loan money in his head. He had no idea that for the past 18 months, every rent check he collected from the tenants was legally the property of Blue Jay Holdings. By depositing those checks into the operating account he controlled, and then stealing from it, he wasn't just embezzling from his aunt anymore, he was embezzling from me. And because the amounts were significant and crossed state lines due to the electronic transfers, he was flirting with wire fraud and interstate theft. I leaned back, linking my fingers behind my head. My mother had told me to find a husband to take care of me. She had told me I should not worry my pretty little head about property management. I wondered how she would react when she learned that her freelance daughter was the landlord of the family's crown jewel. I minimized the camera feed and opened a secure folder on my desktop. The folder was labeled Project Clean Slate. Inside were gigabytes of data, forensic accounting reports, scans of the forged invoices, audio recordings of Julian bragging to his poker buddies about how easy it was to skim the cream off the top of the old lady's business. I even had the IP logs showing him logging into the bank accounts from the VIP lounge of a casino in Atlantic City. It was a nuclear weapon of evidence. I could have released it months ago. I could have stopped him before Josephine died. But Josephine had made me promise to wait. Let them show their true colors, she had said. Wait until they think they are safe. Wait until they have signed their names to the betrayal. Then, and only then, do you strike. They had signed. They had made their choice. They had declared Julian the king and me the peasant. I clicked on the first file in the folder. It was a draft email addressed to Marcus Thorne, my CFO. The subject line read, Immediate liquidation of capital assets, Hargrave Logistics. My parents thought they were smart to give Julian the company. They thought the warehouse equity would save the business. They did not know that the only thing keeping Hargrave Logistics afloat for the last 2 years was a silent investor who had injected $5.1 million of liquidity into their operating budget. That investor was a shell company called Vanguard Ventures. Vanguard Ventures was a wholly owned subsidiary of Ether Systems. I owned their mortgage. I owned their debt. I owned their cash flow. I hit the intercom button. Marcus, I said, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet office. Yes, Alice? His voice was prompt, professional. Prepare the withdrawal notice for the Hargrave account. Call the bank. Tell them we are exercising the clawback clause due to a breach of fiduciary duty by the new management. The breach being? Marcus asked. Though he already knew. The appointment of a CEO with a documented history of embezzlement, I said. And Marcus? Yes? Time the notification to arrive in exactly 45 minutes. I want them to have just enough time to pop the champagne before the bottle shatters in their hands. Understood. Initiating now. I cut the connection. I looked out at the Chicago skyline, the fog beginning to lift, revealing the sharp steel edges of the city. I wasn't just going to take back what was mine. I was going to teach them a lesson in economics. Lesson 1. Never underestimate the person who controls the data. Lesson 2. Solvency is a privilege, not a right. I picked up my coffee cup. It was empty. I stood up to get a refill. The show was about to start, and I wanted to be fully caffeinated when the screaming began. I placed the coffee mug on the coaster and picked up my secure phone. It was a dedicated line, encrypted end-to-end, the kind used by heads of state and people who move enough money to destabilize small economies. I dialed a single digit, 1. Thorne speaking, the voice answered on the first ring. Marcus Thorne was my CFO, my right hand, and the public face of Ether Systems. He was a man of few words and absolute loyalty, mostly because I paid him double what Wall Street offered and gave him the intellectual freedom to destroy inefficiencies. It is done, I said. my voice devoid of the tremor that had threatened to surface during the family call. They have officially appointed Julian as the head of operations and transferred controlling interest. The ink is dry on their digital demise. Understood, Marcus replied. Are we proceeding with the standard divestment strategy, or are we going nuclear? Nuclear, I said. Trigger the clawback clause on the Vanguard Ventures loan. I want the liquidity drained from Hargrave Logistics immediately. Not tomorrow. Not in an hour. Now. On what grounds? Marcus asked, his fingers already audible clattering against his mechanical keyboard. The bank will require a cause for an immediate freeze and withdrawal of operating capital. Breach of the Competence and Ethical Standards Covenant, I recited from memory. Paragraph 4, Section B. The borrower agrees that no individual with a history of financial malfeasance shall be appointed to a C-suite or director-level position. I am forwarding you the evidence package now. I dragged the clean slate folder into our encrypted chat. It contained the forensic proof of Julian's embezzlement from Aunt Josephine. It was a poison pill that my parents had just voluntarily swallowed. Received, Marcus said. I see the transaction logs. This is substantial. Julian really didn't try to hide it, did he? He thought he was stealing from a grandmother who couldn't read a spreadsheet, I said. He didn't know he was stealing from the person who was secretly funding his salary. That was the secret that would break my father. 2 years ago. Hargrave Logistics had been weeks away from bankruptcy. The shipping industry had taken a downturn, and my father's old-school management style, which involved 3-hour lunches and refusing to digitize records, had run the company into the ground. They were bleeding cash. I couldn't let them starve, despite everything, despite the coldness and the exclusion. A part of me, the stupid, sentimental daughter part, hadn't wanted to see them on the street. So, I had created a Delaware-based trust called Vanguard Ventures. Through a maze of intermediaries, Vanguard had approached my father with a lifeline investment, $5.1 million. It was enough to clear their debts, update their fleet, and provide operating capital for 24 months. My father had strutted around Boston like a genius, bragging about how he had secured an angel investor based on the strength of his reputation. He never knew the angel was the daughter he mocked for being a freelancer. But the investment came with strings, thick, steel cables disguised as standard contract jargon. The contract stated that Vanguard Ventures could demand full repayment and freeze all associated assets if the company management demonstrated gross negligence or ethical violations. Appointing a known thief like Julian to the helm was the definition of gross negligence. I am initiating the swift transfer request now, Marcus said. We are recalling the principal amount plus the accrued interest and penalties. The total withdrawal will be roughly $5.3 million. Do it, I said. This will zero out their operating accounts. Alice, they won't be able to buy fuel for the trucks. They won't make payroll next Friday. I know. It's a death sentence for the company. They signed the warrant. Marcus, I'm just the executioner. Send it. Sent, he said. The request is processing. The bank's automated risk algorithm will flag the account within 10 minutes. The freeze should be total by the 30-minute mark. Good work. Open a bottle of something nice. Marcus, take the rest of the day off. And you? I'm going to watch the fire, I said, and hung up. I stood up and walked to the wine cooler built into the north wall of my office. I selected a bottle of Pinot Noir, a vintage from the Willamette Valley that cost more than Julian's car payments. I poured a glass, the deep red liquid swirling against the crystal, and returned to my desk. I maximized the financial dashboard. It was a terrifying thing to watch modern finance in action. There was no explosion, no siren, no physical destruction. Just numbers changing on a screen. I watched the balance of the Hargrave Logistics primary operating account at First Boston Bank. It stood at $140,000. That was their payroll buffer. Then, the Vanguard Ventures liquidity line, which showed as available credit, vanished. The number simply disappeared. Next, the clawback protocol hit. The $140,000 turned into zero. Then it turned red. -5,000. -10,000. The automatic penalties for breach of contract were hitting the account like machine gun fire. Triggered by the bank's computers the moment the Vanguard demand letter was authenticated. The account locked, frozen. It was 11:30 in the morning on a Saturday. I took a sip of wine. The tannins were sharp, cleansing. 3 states away, in the oak-paneled study in Boston. The phone rang. I couldn't hear it, but I could see the result. I had access to the phone logs of Hargrave Logistics, another condition of the investment they had forgotten about. The log showed an incoming call from First Boston Bank, Priority Risk Management. I imagined my father picking it up. He would be annoyed. He hated being disturbed on weekends. He would answer with that pompous, "Robert Hargrave speaking," expecting a concierge or a client. Instead, he would hear a nervous account manager telling him that his credit line had been revoked and his primary accounts were frozen due to a compliance violation. He would argue. He would bluster. He would threaten to sue. "Do you know who I am?" he would shout. The banker would politely explain that it didn't matter who he was because the instructions came from the primary lien holder. Vanguard Ventures. I watched the phone log. The call lasted 4 minutes. Then, a flurry of outgoing calls from Robert's mobile. First, to the bank's regional manager, voicemail. Second, to Mr. Thompson, the lawyer. Third, to the email contact for Vanguard Ventures. I saw the email pop up in my Vanguard inbox on the secondary screen. Subject: Urgent, bank error. To whom it may concern, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. Our accounts have been frozen. Please contact me immediately to resolve this glitch. I deleted the email without opening it. There was no glitch. Meanwhile, the chaos was spreading. My mother, Victoria, would be sensing the tension. She was a woman who could smell poverty approaching like a storm front. She would see Robert's face turn ashen. She would hear the panic in his voice. The phone log showed a call from Victoria's cell phone to Julian. Ah, Julian. I switched tabs to check on my brother's financial activity. Since I had access to the family trust data, I could see the real-time authorization requests on his credit cards. Julian was at the Gilded Cage, a high-end steakhouse in the Seaport District. Of course he was. He was celebrating his ascension to the throne. The transaction log showed a request from 5 minutes ago. Merchant, the Gilded Cage. Amount, $2,400. Status, approved. He had bought a round of drinks, probably vintage Dom Perignon for the whole bar. "Drinks are on the new CEO." I could almost hear him shouting it. I waited. The bank freeze was cascading. When the primary corporate guarantor, Hargrave Logistics, was flagged for fraud and liquidity breach, the personal accounts attached to the company officers were automatically placed under suspicious activity review. It was a standard banking safeguard to prevent executives from fleeing with assets. Julian was now the CEO. His personal credit cards were linked to the corporate liability shield. The freeze hit his personal accounts at 11:42. I watched the next transaction attempt appear on the screen. Merchant, the Gilded Cage. Amount, $450. Item, Wagyu beef tasting menu. Status, processing. I held my breath. Status, declined. Code 05, do not honor. I smiled. Code 05. The banker's way of saying, "Take the card and cut it in half." Julian would be staring at the waiter, a young man who likely made more in tips than Julian had earned in legitimate income his entire life, would be holding the black Amex card with 2 fingers, looking apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, sir. The card was declined." "Try it again," Julian would snap, his face flushing red. "It's a black card. It doesn't have a limit." I tried it 3 times. "Sir, the system says, do not honor. Do you have another form of payment?" Julian didn't have another form of payment. His debit card was linked to the same frozen ecosystem. He had probably tipped the valet with his last $20 cash. The humiliation would be physical. The whispers from the neighboring tables. The way his friends, leeches who only hung around for the free booze, would suddenly find reason to check their phones and drift away. Back in Chicago, my personal cell phone lit up. The screen displayed a photo of my mother. It was a picture I had taken 5 years ago, before the resentment had fully calcified. She looked younger, softer. The phone vibrated against the mahogany desk. Buzz, buzz, buzz. She was calling Alice. She was calling the fixer. She was calling the sensible daughter who might have a few $1,000s stashed away, or who could at least offer a sympathetic ear and tell her it was all going to be okay. She wasn't calling because she missed me. She was calling because the ship was sinking and she needed a life raft. I let it ring. I watched the name Mom flash on the screen. It was a word that used to hold so much power over me. It used to command obedience, guilt, and a desperate desire for validation. Now, it was just text on a pixelated display. The ringing stopped. Missed call. A second later, a text message arrived. Alice, pick up. It is an emergency. Your father is having an issue with the bank. We need you to come to Boston, now. I didn't open the message. Instead, I activated the auto-reply script I had written specifically for this weekend. I pressed send. I'm sorry. I am currently in a meeting with a client and cannot be disturbed. I will return your call when my schedule permits. It was the same excuse they had given me for a decade. Father is in a meeting. Julian is busy with networking. We can't talk now. Alice, we are doing important work. Now, I was the one with the important work. I took another sip of wine and watched the timeline. The initial shock was setting in. The paralysis. But they still didn't understand the scope of it. They thought this was a banking error, a misunderstanding, a temporary glitch that could be fixed with a few angry phone calls. They didn't realize that the $5.1 million was gone forever. They didn't realize that by Monday morning, the vendors would stop delivering fuel. They didn't realize that the trucks, their precious fleet, would be sitting idle in the yards, and most importantly, they didn't realize that the shark circling their bleeding boat was the girl they had just cut out of the will. I leaned back in my chair, the leather cool against my skin. The silence in my apartment was no longer lonely. It was expectant. It was the hush of a theater before the second act curtain rises. Cheers, Julian, I whispered to the empty room. Welcome to the real world. I turned my attention back to the dossier. The financial ruin was just the opening salvo. The money was the easy part. Taking the money just made them poor. I wanted them broken. I opened the next file in the sequence. It was the audit report on the physical condition of the warehouses, the ones Julian claimed to have been maintaining perfectly. The photos showed water damage, black mold, and structural neglect. It was time to show my parents exactly what their golden boy had been doing while they were busy polishing his crown. I prepared the email. This one wouldn't be anonymous. This one would come from the auditor. But first, I would let them sit in the dark for a few more hours. I wanted the fear to marinate. I wanted them to sweat. I poured the last of the wine into my glass. The afternoon was just beginning. Sunday morning arrived in Boston with the gray, oppressive weight of a hangover. I imagined the scene in the Hargrave Library perfectly. Aided by the frantic digital footprint my family was leaving across the server nodes I monitored. While I sat in my Chicago apartment eating a bagel and reviewing the quarterly projections for a shipping client in Tokyo, my father's world was ending one notification at a time. The first domino fell at 9 in the morning. It came in the form of an automated alert from their payroll processing service, a DP. The email was sent to the CFO's inbox, which was technically Julian now, and copied to the chairman. My father? I read the intercepted copy on my second monitor. Subject: critical error. Insufficient funds for payroll batch, 4,092. The body of the email was clinically polite. It informed them that the scheduled transfer of $112,000, intended to pay the 65 employees of Hargrave Logistics for the last 2 weeks of work, had failed. The operating account balance was negative. I could picture the chaos. Robert Hargrave, a man who prided himself on never missing a payment in 40 years, staring at his iPad in disbelief. According to the audio logs from the conference room microphone, which I had remotely activated hours ago, the confrontation began 10 minutes later. Julian! My father's voice was a bark of panic. Get in here! Now! My brother shuffled into the room. I could hear the hesitation in his footsteps. He was likely still reeling from the humiliation at the steakhouse the night before. His black card declined in front of his sycophants. He probably hadn't slept. "What is it, Dad?" Julian asked. "I have a headache." "A DP just bounced our payroll," Father shouted. "The operating account is frozen. The Vanguard credit line is gone. What did you do?" "I didn't do anything." Julian's defense was automatic, the reflex of a child caught with his hand in the jar. "It is the market. Dad, you know how volatile the logistics sector has been. The automated systems are probably just glitching, or maybe it is a competitor. Yes, that is it. Someone is trying to sabotage us." I leaned back in my chair, listening to him spin the web. It was pathetic. He blamed Chinese trade tariffs. He blamed a supposed cyber attack on the banking sector. He blamed everyone and everything except the reality that he had treated the company accounts like a personal piggy bank. "A glitch does not wipe out $5 million of liquidity overnight," Father said, his voice trembling. "I am calling the Vanguard representative. We need to clear this up before the employees find out on Monday morning. If the drivers don't get paid, the trucks don't move. If the trucks don't move, we are in breach of contract with every client we have." I watched on my screen as my father drafted a desperate email to the contact address for Vanguard Ventures. He typed with furious, shaking fingers. "To Vanguard Ventures Legal Team. From Robert Hargrave. Subject: Urgent. Account freeze. Please contact me immediately. There has been a mistake regarding our credit facility. My son, the new CEO, assures me that all compliance protocols are in place. I let him hit send. The response from my system was instantaneous. It was a pre-written legal template I had prepared months ago for this exact moment. From Vanguard Ventures Legal Department to Robert Hargrave. Subject: Notice of termination and acceleration of debt. Mr. Hargrave, please be advised that pursuant to Article 4, Section 2 of the lending agreement, Vanguard Ventures has exercised its right to terminate the credit facility effective immediately. This action is taken due to a material breach of the Good Stewardship Clause following the appointment of executive leadership with a documented history of financial malfeasance. The total outstanding principal of $5.1 million is now due in full. We have placed a lien on all liquid assets of Hargrave Logistics. Further communication should be directed to our litigation department." I heard the silence in the library after he read it. It was a thick, suffocating silence. "Malfeasance?" Father whispered. "Documented history of financial malfeasance? Julian, what are they talking about?" "I don't know!" Julian screamed, his voice cracking. "They are lying. They are trying to steal the company. You have to sue them. Dad, sue them for everything." It was the perfect moment for the second blow. I opened the Project Clean Slate folder again. It was time to show them exactly what documented history meant. I composed a new email. I used a burner account, routing the signal through 3 different countries. The sender name was simply The Auditor. Subject: Independent Audit Report. South Boston Warehouse Complex. Attachment: forensic_analysis_Hargrave_assets. PDF. I sent it to both my parents. "You have mail," I whispered to the empty room. In Boston. My mother's iPad chimed. "Robert," she said, her voice wavering, "I just got an email. It looks official. It is about the warehouse, the one Julian has been managing." "Open it," Father said. I opened the file on my own screen to follow along. It was a masterpiece of forensic accounting. Page 1 was a summary of the Apex roofing incident. Last winter, Julian had claimed that the roof of Unit 3 had collapsed under snow. He had requested $50,000 from Aunt Josephine's account for emergency repairs. He had provided an invoice from a company called Apex Roofing and Siding. The report I just sent them included a photo of the Apex Roofing business address. It was a mailbox inside a UPS store in a strip mall in Revere. Below that was a photo of the roof of Unit 3. Taken by a drone I had hired 2 days ago. The beams were rotted. The tar paper was peeling. There was no new roof. $50,000, Father read aloud, his voice flat. For a roof that does not exist. That is a mistake, Julian stammered. I could hear him pacing. The contractor must have scammed me. I am the victim here. Keep reading, Father said. Page 5 of the report detailed the cash rents. The warehouse had 6 units. Julian had reported that 2 of them were vacant for the last 18 months. He claimed the market was soft. The report included scanned copies of lease agreements signed by 2 tenants, a specialized auto body shop and a craft brewery storage facility. Both tenants had been paying rent in cash, at Julian's request, for a discount, $2,500 a month, per unit. For 18 months, $90,000 in cash, pocketed. He has been collecting rent, Father said. He sounded like a man waking up from anesthesia, groggy, confused, and in pain. He has been collecting rent and reporting the units as empty. He has been filing false tax returns for the estate, the report went on. Fake plumbing bills, inflated security costs, kickbacks from the snow removal service. The grand total was highlighted in bold red text at the bottom of the final page. Total misappropriated funds, $450,000. $450,000, Father repeated. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. You stole nearly $500,000 from your aunt, from my sister. I didn't steal it, Julian shouted. I earned it. I managed that dump. She wasn't paying me enough. I was just taking my commission. It was going to be mine anyway. There it was, the confession. I waited for the explosion. I waited for my father to throw him out. I waited for the police to be called. But then, my mother spoke. Now, Robert, Victoria said. Her voice was trembling, but she was shifting into damage control mode. Let us not use words like steal. Julian. Julian is creative with finances. He was under a lot of pressure. Maybe the paperwork is just messy. You know how he is with details. It is just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Father asked incredulously. Victoria, he created a fake roofing company. He was trying to save on taxes, she insisted. He was trying to be smart. The boy has vision. Robert, we cannot let a few accounting errors ruin his future. He is the CEO now, if this gets out. We are ruined. We have to bury this. I closed my eyes for a second. Even now, facing irrefutable proof that her golden boy was a criminal. She was protecting him. She was willing to let the ship sink as long as Julian didn't get wet. It was disgusting, and it confirmed that I had made the right choice. My phone rang. It was Robert. I stared at the screen. He was calling the lifeline. He was calling the daughter he had dismissed as a failure less than 24 hours ago. I let it ring 3 times. Then I picked up. Hello? I answered. My voice was calm, casual. I made sure to sound like I was in the middle of something unimportant. Dad? I'm just heading out to get some groceries. Is everything okay? Alice, he said. He sounded 20 years older than he had yesterday. His breath was ragged. Alice, we have a situation. A situation? I asked. Is it Julian? Is he celebrating his big promotion? No, he snapped, then caught himself. Listen, Alice, there has been a banking error, a massive glitch. The company accounts are temporarily frozen. It is going to be resolved by Monday or Tuesday, definitely. But right now we have a liquidity gap. Oh, I said. That sounds stressful. It is, he said. The payroll is due, and we have a vendor payment that cannot be missed. I need a short-term loan. A loan? Just a bridge loan, he said quickly. $50,000. I will pay you back next week with interest. Double interest. I know you have some savings from your computer work. It is just for 48 hours. Alice, family, helping family. $50,000. The exact amount Julian had stolen with the fake roof scam. The irony was poetic. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't apologize for what he said at the meeting. He just assumed that because I existed, I was obligated to clean up their mess. He assumed my little savings were his to command. "Dad," I said, putting a note of confusion into my voice. $50,000? That is a huge amount of money. It is not huge. Alice, he said, his patience fraying. It is a standard transaction. You must have something put away. You live like a nun in that apartment. I live simply because I have to. Dad, I lied smooth as silk. I'm a freelancer. The market is tough right now. I have rent. I have student loans. I don't have $50,000 sitting in a checking account. Check your investments, he demanded. Sell some stock. Borrow it from a friend. Alice, this is the company. This is our legacy. Your legacy, I corrected him gently. You gave the legacy to Julian yesterday. Remember? You said he was the only one who contributed. Alice, don't play games with me, he shouted. We are desperate. If we don't pay the drivers, the union will strike. The company will collapse. I'm sorry, Dad, I said. I really am. I wish I could help, but I just don't have the cash. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear his heavy breathing. I could hear the realization sinking in. Not that he was wrong about me, but that he was powerless. But, I added, I can help in another way. How? He asked, hope flaring up in his voice. I know a guy, I said. I did a website for him once. He's very good, very discreet. Who is he? A private lender? An investor? No, I said. He is a bankruptcy attorney. He specializes in Chapter 7 liquidations for family businesses destroyed by internal fraud. I can text you his number. I heard a sound like a choked sob, or maybe a gasp of pure shock. You? He stammered. You ungrateful. I'll send the number, I said. Good luck, Dad. It sounds like you and the new CEO have a lot of work to do. I hung up. I didn't send the number. I sat there in the silence, my heart beating a calm. Steady rhythm. The bond was severed. The illusion that they were the powerful parents and I was the helpless child was shattered forever. Robert Hargrave now knew two things. His son was a thief, and his daughter was useless to him. He was wrong about the second part. I wasn't useless. I was the most powerful person in his life. He just didn't know it yet. I turned back to my computer. The financial chokehold was tight. But Julian was a rat. When rats are cornered, they try to chew through the walls. I pulled up the property records for the warehouse. I knew exactly what Julian would do next. He had no cash. He had no credit. But he had a piece of paper, the will, that said he owned a $6 million building. He would try to sell it. He would try to sell the asset to save his skin. And that was exactly where I wanted him. Walking into the final trap, holding a deed that wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. Go ahead, Julian, I whispered, watching his GPS signal leave the house and head toward the financial district. Try to sell my building. Make my day. I watched the blue dot on my screen move across the map of Boston. It was Julian's phone. He was driving fast, weaving through the Sunday traffic, heading straight for the offices of Prestige Commercial Realty. It was a predictable move. A desperate man with a liquidity crisis and a shiny new inheritance does only one thing. He liquidates. He was going to sell the warehouse complex. He probably thought he could get a quick cash deal, maybe $4 million for a $6 million property, if he promised a fast closing. $4 million would pay off the stolen funds, cover the company payroll, and leave him with enough to keep pretending he was a genius. I opened a new audio channel. I had hacked the microphone on his phone months ago. A simple backdoor installed via a security update link I'd sent him under the guise of tech support. I heard the car door slam. I heard his heavy breathing as he walked into the realtor's office. I need to sell the South Boston property, Julian announced without preamble. Today, I want a cash buyer. I'm willing to take a haircut on the price for speed. The realtor, a man named Mr. Davis, whom Julian had likely met at one of his networking mixers, sounded surprised. Julian, it's Sunday. I don't care what day it is. Julian snapped. I have the deed. Well, I have the will. My aunt left it to me. I want it listed immediately. Find me a buyer by tomorrow morning. Okay. Calm down, Davis said. Let me pull up the property records. We need to verify the plat map and the title status before we can list anything. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. Then silence. A long, confusing silence. That's odd, Davis muttered. What is it? Julian demanded. The computer slow? No, Davis said slowly. Julian, are you sure you own this property? Of course I'm sure. The will was read yesterday. My lawyer was there. My parents were there. I understand that, Davis said, his voice dropping to a cautious, professional tone. But according to the Suffolk County Registry of Deeds, Josephine Hargrave didn't own this property when she died. What are you talking about? The title was transferred 18 months ago, Davis explained. It was a quitclaim deed. Grantor, Josephine Hargrave. Grantee, Blue Jay Holdings, LLC. Blue Jay Holdings? Julian shouted. Who the hell is Blue Jay Holdings? I don't know, Davis replied. But they are the legal owners, and unless you are the signatory for Blue Jay Holdings, you don't have the right to sell a single brick of that warehouse. I heard the sound of a chair being kicked back. Julian was storming out. It's a mistake, he yelled over his shoulder. It's a clerical error. I'm going to kill that lawyer. I cut the audio feed and leaned back. The rat had hit the wall. 30 minutes later, the Hargrave family was assembled in the library again. I wasn't on the call, but I didn't need to be. I had the room bugged via the smart thermostat I had gifted them last Christmas. Thompson, my father was roaring. Get over here now. Bring the files. When the lawyer arrived, he was out of breath. Robert, please, it's Sunday. Look at this. Father slammed a printout onto the table. It was the deed record Julian had pulled from the online registry. Josephine sold the property? 18 months ago? Why didn't you know about this? I drafted the will 10 years ago, Thompson stammered. I haven't managed her day-to-day real estate transactions in years. She became very private towards the end. Check the signature, Julian screamed. It has to be a forgery. Someone stole it from her. I heard the rustle of papers as Thompson examined the copy of the deed. The signature looks authentic, Thompson admitted, his voice weak. And it's notarized by a notary at the First National Bank. This is a legal transfer. Robert, the Blue Jay Trust, holds the title. Who is the trustee? Mother asked, her voice sharp with panic. Who is behind Blue Jay Holdings? It's a blind trust, Thompson said. Registered in Delaware. The ownership is shielded. The only contact information is a registered agent address in Chicago. Chicago? Father repeated. The word hung in the air. Chicago, Mother whispered. Alice is in Chicago. Don't be ridiculous, Father scoffed. Alice? She can barely pay her rent. She doesn't have the money to set up a holding company. She doesn't even know what a holding company is. But the address, Mother insisted. It's a skyscraper. The Ether Tower. Isn't that where she said she had a client once? It's a coincidence, Julian spat. Some scammer targeted Aunt Josephine. They tricked her into signing it over. We need to find them and sue them. My phone rang. It was Victoria. I picked it up on the first ring. I was done playing games. Hello, Mother. Alice, she said. Her tone was no longer pleading. It was accusatory. It was the voice of a woman looking for a scapegoat. Do you know anything about a company called Blue Jay Holdings? Yes, I said. I do. The line went dead silent. You do? She faltered. What do you know? Are they the ones who scammed your aunt? We need to know who they are. Alice, they are stealing your brother's inheritance. They aren't stealing anything, I said calmly. Mother, if you want answers, set up the video conference, invite Julian, invite Dad, and tell Mr. Thompson to stay. You are going to want a lawyer present for this. Why? She demanded. Just do it. I hung up and walked to my closet. I took off the oversized gray sweater I had been wearing. I took off the leggings, I put on a bespoke charcoal suit from Armani. I put on my diamond stud earrings. I pulled my hair back into a severe, professional chignon. I applied a layer of red lipstick, the color of power, the color of blood. I walked out of my home office and into the main boardroom of Ether Systems. The glass walls overlooked the city. I sat at the head of the 20-foot conference table. I opened my laptop and connected to the family call. When my video feed popped up on their screen in Boston, I saw them gasp. They were expecting Alice the freelancer, sitting in her messy apartment with a mug of cheap coffee. Instead, they saw Alice the CEO. They saw the expansive boardroom behind me. They saw the city of Chicago sprawled out below me like a conquered kingdom. They saw the suit. They saw the cold, hard look in my eyes. "Alice?" Father asked, squinting at the screen. "Where are you?" "I am in my office." "Father," I said. My voice was amplified by the boardroom's high-end audio system. It sounded rich, commanding. "Your office?" Julian sneered, though his voice lacked its usual bite. "Did you break in on a Sunday to use the Wi-Fi?" "Sit down, Julian," I said. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. He sat. "You wanted to know about Blue Jay Holdings," I said. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single document. It was the Certificate of Beneficial Ownership. I held it up to the camera lens. "Blue Jay Holdings is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Blue Jay Trust," I explained, speaking slowly, as if to a room of slow children. "And the sole beneficiary and trustee of that trust is me." "You?" Mother whispered. She put a hand to her throat. "But Josephine left it to Julian. The will." "The will is irrelevant," I said. "Aunt Josephine transferred the property to me 18 months ago. She knew she was dying, and more importantly, she knew Julian was a thief." "Liar!" Julian shouted, jumping up. "She loved me. She would never do that." "She loved the nephew she thought you were," I corrected him. "She despised the criminal you actually are. She found out about the fake roof repairs. Julian, she found out about the cash rents. She saw every dollar you stole from her." Julian's face went white. All the blood drained from his handsome, empty head. "She wanted to go to the police," I continued. "I stopped her. I told her that it would break Mom's heart, so we made a deal. She would transfer the property to me to protect it from your gambling addiction, and we would let you keep managing it until she passed. We gave you a chance to prove you could change, to prove you could run it honestly." I leaned forward, staring into the camera. "But you didn't change, did you? You kept stealing. You stole for another 1.5 years. You stole from her on her deathbed." "You knew?" Julian stammered. "You knew the whole time?" "Every day," I said. "Every fake invoice, every cash payment. I watched you do it." "You let me work," he screamed, his face twisting into an ugly mask of entitlement. "You let me drive down there in the middle of the night. You let me deal with the tenants. You let me work for free for 18 months. "For free?" I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Julian, you embezzled $450,000 during that period. I'd say you were extremely well compensated for your incompetence." "This is illegal!" Father shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You tricked him. This is entrapment." "It is not entrapment, Robert," I said, dropping the dad. "It is ownership. I own the building. I have the deed. I have the notary logs. I have the video of Josephine signing the papers with a smile on her face." "Give it back," Mother said. She was crying now, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. "Alice, please, he is your brother. He needs this. The company needs this. Give it back to the family." "I am the family," I said. "I am the only one in this family who actually owns anything. Julian owns nothing. You own nothing. In fact, based on the email I sent you earlier, you owe $5.1 million to Vanguard Ventures." Father froze. He looked at me with a dawning horror. "Vanguard Ventures," he whispered. "Chicago address. AI Consulting Parent Company. He looked at the logo on the wall behind me, the stylized A of Ether Systems. No, he gasped. No, it's not possible. Hello, Father, I said. I'm the angel investor. I'm the one who paid for your country club membership last year. I'm the one who paid for the fuel in your trucks. I'm the one who kept your lights on. You? Julian choked out. You are the silent partner? I was, I said. Until you breached the contract. Now, I am just your creditor, and I'm calling in the debt. I looked at Thompson, the lawyer, who was staring at the screen with his mouth open. Mr. Thompson, I said, you might want to explain to my brother what happens when you try to sell a property you don't own. I believe the term is attempted real estate fraud. Add that to the embezzlement and the tax evasion. Alice, Father said, his voice breaking. Why? Why are you doing this? Because you said I didn't contribute, I replied. You said I chose a vague digital hobby. I just wanted to show you exactly what my hobby is capable of. I closed the folder on the table. The meeting is adjourned, I said. I suggest you start looking for that $50,000. Julian, my auditors are very thorough. The silence in the Boston Library was so profound that through the high-definition audio feed, I could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. It was counting down the seconds of their relevance. Julian was slumped in his chair, his face a portrait of shattered arrogance. He looked like a child who had just been told that Santa Claus was not only fake, but was also the one suing him for cookie theft. You are confused. Julian, I said, my voice cutting through the static of their shock. Let me clarify the accounting for you. You claimed a moment ago that you managed the property for free. That implies altruism. That implies sacrifice. I tapped a key on my laptop, bringing up a waveform on the shared screen. This, I said, pointing to the jagged blue lines, is a recording from November 4th of last year. You were on the phone with a man named Sal. Sal runs a shell company that supposedly provides security services. I pressed play. Julian's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. Listen, Sal, I need another invoice for the warehouse. Make it for emergency surveillance upgrades. Put down $12,000. Yeah, the usual split. I'll wire your cut to the crypto wallet. Just send the PDF so I can show the old lady if she asks. I stopped the playback. Emergency surveillance upgrades, I repeated dryly. For a building that doesn't even have functioning cameras. I checked the logs. Julian, you used that $12,000 to buy a vintage Rolex, the one you are wearing right now, I assume? Julian instinctively covered his left wrist with his right hand. The gesture was so guilty it was almost comical. That is out of context, he sputtered, though his voice lacked any real conviction. And here is the context, I continued, pulling up a spreadsheet. $450,000. That is the total sum of rent collected and maintenance funds diverted into your personal accounts over the last 18 months. You didn't work for free. You paid yourself a salary of nearly $25,000 a month to manage a property that required zero actual work. I leaned into the camera, letting my face fill their screen. But here's the legal twist. Brother, when you were stealing from Aunt Josephine, it was elder abuse, disgusting, but a civil matter within the family. But for the last 18 months, the property has belonged to Blue Jay Holdings. It has belonged to me. I paused to let the legal weight of that sink in. That means you have been collecting revenue on my asset without my permission. You have been creating fraudulent invoices to deceive a corporate entity. That is not just a family misunderstanding. That is wire fraud. That is embezzlement. That is larceny over $250. And since I live in Chicago and the property is in Boston, and the money moved across state lines, it is a federal crime. My mother let out a low, keen wail. She looked from Julian to the screen, her eyes wide with a frantic, animalistic panic. Alice, stop, she begged. Please, he is your brother. You cannot use words like federal crime. You cannot send your own brother to prison. She stood up and walked toward the camera, her hands clasped in prayer. Look at you, she said, gesturing to my office, to the expensive suit, to the diamond earrings glinting in the studio lights. You have done so well. We didn't know. But clearly, you have made a fortune. This company, this tower, you are rich. Alice, filthy rich. What is $400,000 to you? It is pocket change. Why are you counting pennies when your brother is drowning? I felt a cold flash of anger. Sharp and precise, it was the same old song. Alice the resource, Alice the safety net, Alice who should set herself on fire to keep Julian warm. Sit down, Mother, I said. Alice, please. I said sit down. She sank back into her chair, startled by the command in my voice. You are missing the point, I said, keeping my tone level. This is not about the money. I could burn $450,000 right now and not miss a meal. This is about the narrative you have been force-feeding me for 30 years. I looked at my father. Yesterday, you told me Julian deserved the entire estate because he was competent. You said he was the future of the family. You said I was a failure who didn't contribute. I brought up the audit report again, highlighting the section on the fake roof repairs. I am simply conducting a performance review, I said. You claimed he was a capable businessman. I am proving to you, with empirical data, that his only true talent is theft. He is not a CEO. He is a parasite. And the only reason he looks successful is because he was feeding on the blood of a dying woman and a sister he thought was too stupid to notice. My father's face turned a deep, dangerous shade of purple. He stood up, placing his hands flat on the heavy oak table. He tried to summon the ghost of the authority he used to wield over me when I was a teenager. That is enough, he roared. I don't care about your charts. I don't care about your shell companies. I am your father, Alice, and I am ordering you, do you hear me? I am ordering you to sign that property back over to the family immediately. He pointed a shaking finger at the camera. You will transfer the deed to Julian. You will forgive this so-called debt, and you will release the funds to Hargrave Logistics to save the company. We are your family, and you will do your duty. I stared at him. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just let his words hang in the air, ridiculous and impotent. Then I laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was a genuine, full-throated laugh of disbelief. You are ordering me? I asked, wiping a tear of mirth from my eye. Dad, look around you. Look at the room you are sitting in. That library? It is mortgaged. The company you are trying to save? It is insolvent. It is not insolvent, he shouted. We just have a temporary cash flow problem because of your interference. No, I said, my voice hardening. You have a cash flow problem because for the last 2 years, your business has been a corpse kept alive by a ventilator, and I am the one paying the electric bill for the hospital. What are you talking about? He demanded. The $5.1 million, I said slowly. The angel investor, Vanguard Ventures. You still don't get it, do you? Even after I told you. I leaned back in my executive chair, steepling my fingers. There was no brilliant investor who believed in your vision. Dad, the market analyzed Hargrave Logistics 2 years ago and valued it at 0. Junk status. No bank would touch you. The only reason you got that $5 million is because I felt sorry for you. You? He whispered. The fight was draining out of him. But the emails, the lawyers. All me, I said. My lawyers, my money. I funneled the capital through Vanguard Ventures to keep you afloat because I didn't want to see you lose the house. I bought your debt. I bought your trucks. I bought your dignity. I looked at Julian. And how did you repay me? By mocking me. By cutting me out of the will. By telling me I should find a husband because I wasn't smart enough to handle business. You took my charity and spat in my face. The realization hit them like a physical blow. I watched my father sink back into his chair, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. He was processing the fact that the useless daughter was the only reason he wasn't greeting customers at a Walmart. So, I said, when you order me to save the company, you are asking me to pour more water into a bucket full of holes. And frankly, I am done carrying the bucket. Alice, Mother sobbed, We didn't know. How could we know? You didn't know because you never asked, I replied. You never asked me about my work. You never asked me about my life. You just assumed I was nothing. I checked my watch. A platinum Patek Philippe. I made sure they saw it. I have a board meeting in 10 minutes. I lied. So here is the offer. It is non-negotiable. I looked directly at Julian. He was trembling now, his hands shaking uncontrollably. You have 48 hours, I said. 48 hours for what? Julian whispered. To return the $450,000 you stole from me, I said. I don't care how you get it. Sell your watch, sell your car, sell your kidney. I want the money wired to the Blue Jay Holdings account by Tuesday at noon. I can't, Julian cried. I don't have it. I spent it. Then I suggest you start begging, I said coldly, because if the funds are not in my account at 12:01 on Tuesday, I am handing the entire evidence file, the recordings, the invoices, the bank logs, to the FBI, and given the amount, you are looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison. You wouldn't, Father gasped. He is your blood. He is a thief, I said. And I am a businesswoman. I don't negotiate with thieves. Alice, Mother screamed. 48 hours. Julian, I said. Tick-tock. I reached out and severed the connection. The screen went black. I sat there for a moment in the silence of my boardroom. My heart was beating fast, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the kill. I had stripped them naked. I had taken away their pride, their illusions, and their safety. But I wasn't done. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus. Is the press release ready? I asked. Drafted and ready to go, Marcus replied. Announcement of the hostile takeover of Hargrave Logistics debt obligations? Not yet, I said. Hold it until Tuesday. I want to see if he tries to run first. Understood. And Alice? Yes. That was brutal. That was justice, I said. And we are just getting to the sentencing phase. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain had started to fall over Chicago, washing the city in gray. I wondered if it was raining in Boston. I hoped the roof of the warehouse was leaking right onto Julian's head. The 48-hour clock began ticking with the deafening sound of a guillotine blade being hoisted into position. In Boston, the Hargrave household dissolved into a frantic, undignified chaos. I did not need to be there to see it. The data told the story. Julian's financial footprint for the first 3 hours was a study in pure panic. He logged into his DraftKings account, hoping to withdraw funds, but found a balance of $12.50. He tried to liquidate his crypto wallet, only to remember that he had lost the private keys to his Bitcoin storage 3 years ago during a drunken weekend in Las Vegas. He even tried to sell his Porsche back to the dealership, but my system flagged the title transfer immediately because the car was technically a lease under the company name, a company whose assets were currently frozen by Vanguard Ventures. He was a rat running inside a burning maze, hitting dead end after dead end. My father fared no better. I monitored his call logs from my Chicago office. He spent the afternoon dialing every contact in his Rolodex. These were men he had played golf with for 30 years, men who had eaten at his table and drunk his wine. Jim, it is Robert. Listen, we have a temporary liquidity issue due to a banking error. I was wondering if... The calls were short. Most lasted less than 30 seconds. The rumor mill in Boston was faster than fiber optics. Everyone knew Hargrave Logistics was taking on water, and in the world of high society, poverty is contagious. Nobody wanted to catch the infection. By 5 p.m, my father stopped calling. The silence of the phone was louder than any rejection, but my mother, Victoria, was not one to sit and wait for the executioner. She decided to go to the source. I saw the flight reservation hit her credit card at 6 p.m. A one-way ticket to Chicago. Departing at 6 the next morning, she was coming to beg, or to threaten, or perhaps just to see if the monster in the high tower was really her daughter. I was ready for her. When she arrived at the Ether Tower on Monday morning, it was raining. a cold, miserable Chicago rain that soaked through wool coats and ruined expensive blowouts. I watched her enter the lobby through the security feed. She looked small. The vaulted ceilings of the ether atrium were designed to intimidate. 40 feet of glass and steel that made human beings feel like ants. She walked up to the front desk, clutching her wet Hermes bag like a shield. "I am here to see Alice Hargrave," she announced to the receptionist, a sharp young woman named Sarah. "I am her mother." "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" Sarah asked, her voice pleasant but firm. "I don't need an appointment," Mother snapped, her old entitlement flaring up. "I am her mother. Tell her I am here." Sarah didn't blink. She typed something into her console. "I see. One moment, please." My phone buzzed. "Visitor in lobby. Victoria Hargrave. No appointment. Direct to secure elevator?" I typed back, "No, let her wait." "I am sorry. Mrs. Hargrave," Sarah said. "The CEO is currently in a series of high-level meetings. Her schedule is fully booked until lunch." "The CEO?" Mother repeated. "You mean Alice?" "Yes, Ms. Hargrave. If you would like to take a seat in the waiting area, I can let her assistant know you are here, but it might be a while." And so, Victoria Hargrave waited. She sat on a minimalist leather bench in the lobby for 3 hours. I let her sit there while I handled a crisis for a pharmaceutical client in Zurich. I let her sit there while I drank my morning espresso. I wanted her to watch. I wanted her to see the world I had built. From her vantage point, she watched the employees of Ether Systems stream in. These were not the tired, beaten-down drivers of Hargrave Logistics. These were the elite. Data scientists from Stanford, engineers from Mumbai, quantitative analysts from London. They walked with purpose. They spoke in hushed tones about algorithms and market shifts every time someone passed the reception desk. They looked up at the massive digital display behind it, a screen tracking real-time global supply chains. At one point, a VP of engineering walked by with 2 junior developers. "Did Alice approve the new kernel update?" the VP asked. "Yes," the developer replied. "She reviewed the code herself last night. She caught a redundancy we all missed. The woman is a machine." "Thank God," the VP said. "If Alice signed off on it, we are safe to deploy." I watched my mother's face on the camera. She was listening. She was hearing them speak about me not as a disappointment, not as a freelancer who needed a husband, but as a deity. The cognitive dissonance was physically visible. She kept shifting in her seat, adjusting her pearls, trying to reconcile the daughter she knew with the titan these people worshipped. At 11:30, I finally pressed the button. "Send her up," I told Sarah, when the elevator doors opened on the penthouse floor. Mother looked shaken. The ride up alone took 40 seconds. My assistant, David, met her. "Mrs. Hargrave, please, follow me." He led her past the open-plan operations floor, past the server rooms humming with blue light, and into my corner office. I was standing by the window, looking out at the gray expanse of Lake Michigan. I didn't turn around immediately when she entered. "Alice," she said. Her voice was quiet, stripped of its usual trill. I turned. She looked at me. She really looked at me. She took in the Armani suit, the office that was larger than the entire ground floor of our Boston home, the air of absolute control that radiated from every surface. "Sit down, Mother," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite my desk. She sat. She didn't comment on the decor. She didn't criticize my hair. She looked terrified. "I didn't know," she whispered. "We had no idea." "You didn't want to know," I said. "It didn't fit the story." "The story?" "The story where Julian is the prince, and I am the extra," I said. "The story where the son inherits the kingdom, and the daughter marries a dentist and stays quiet." She flinched. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. "He is in trouble, Alice," she said. "Real trouble. He is talking about ending it. He is scared." "He should be," I said. "Federal prison is a scary place." You have to stop this, she pleaded. You have proved your point. You are powerful. You are rich. You have won. Isn't that enough? Why do you have to destroy him? He destroyed himself, I said. I am just the one turning on the lights. He is your brother, she cried, leaning forward. We raised you together. You played in the same sandbox. And you always gave him the bigger shovel, I countered. Let's be honest. Mother, for once in our lives, let us just speak the truth. Why him? Why was he the golden boy? Was he smarter? No. Was he kinder? No. Was he harder working? Clearly not. She looked down at her hands, twisting the wedding ring on her finger. It is different, she murmured. Why? I pressed. Tell me why. She took a ragged breath. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the raw, ugly truth in her eyes. Because he is the sun, she said. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Your father built that company for a son, she continued, her voice gaining a desperate strength. A man needs a legacy. Alice, a man needs to pass his name down. You were supposed to be the nurturer. You were supposed to leave and build a family of your own. Julian was supposed to carry the burden of the Hargrave name. That is just how the world works. That is how your world works, I corrected her. In my world, competence is the only currency, and your son is bankrupt. I know he's weak, she burst out. Do you think I don't know? I know he's soft. I know he gambles. I have been covering for him for years. I have been cleaning up his messes since he was 6 years old because I knew he couldn't survive on his own. That is why he needs the inheritance. Alice, you don't need it. You are a shark. You can survive anything. But Julian? Without the money, without the company, he is nothing. She reached across the desk, trying to grab my hand. I pulled back. Please, she sobbed. Save him. Not because he deserves it, but because I am asking you, as your mother, save him because you are strong enough to do it. It was a masterful performance. She was weaponizing my own competence against me. She was admitting that I was superior, but using that superiority to justify her neglect. She was saying that because I was strong, I deserved to be burdened, and because he was weak, he deserved to be carried. No, I said. The word was soft, but it hit her like a slap. Alice. I am not a bank, Mother, I said, standing up. And I am not a rehabilitation center for broken men. You say you covered for him? You say you cleaned up his messes? That is why he is a thief. You taught him that there are no consequences. You taught him that he could break things and Mommy would fix it. I walked around the desk and stood over her. I am not the result of your love, I said, my voice trembling with a suppressed rage I had carried for a decade. I am the result of your neglect. You ignored me. So I built a world where I didn't need you. You underestimated me. So I became something you couldn't comprehend. And now? Now you want me to use the power I built in spite of you to save the son you chose over me? I shook my head. The check is due, Victoria, and I am not paying it. She stared at me, her face pale and stricken. She realized, finally, that the bond was not just strained, it was severed. You are cold, she whispered. You are so cold. I learned from the best, I said. Now, please leave. I have a company to run. While my mother was sobbing in the elevator, heading back down to the street, Julian was back in Boston, proving exactly why he was doomed. He was sitting in the back office of a strip mall law firm, the kind with a neon sign that says DUI defense in the window. He was meeting with a man named Saul Goodman. No, that was a character on TV. This man's name was Barry, and he wore a suit that was 2 sizes too big and smelled of stale cigarette smoke. I knew this because I had activated the microphone on Julian's phone again. So, here is the play, Barry was saying, his voice raspy. We attack the deed. We say the old lady was senile. We say the signature was coerced. Or better yet, We say it is a forgery. But it was notarized, Julian whined. My sister has the logs. Notaries make mistakes, Barry said. Or maybe the notary record doesn't exist? If we can show that the digital entry was corrupted, or never filed properly, we can create reasonable doubt. If we cast doubt on the title, we can tie this up in probate court for 5 years. She won't be able to kick you out while the lawsuit is pending. Can we do that? Julian asked. For $10,000 cash, I can find an IT expert who can find a lot of things. Barry chuckled. I can get the cash, Julian said. I have a watch I can pawn. It was pathetic. It was also incredibly stupid. Julian left the lawyer's office and went straight to his car. He opened his laptop. He wasn't a coder, but he knew enough to try and log into the Massachusetts Land Records portal using the admin password he had stolen from Thompson's files years ago. He was trying to access the metadata of the deed upload. He wanted to delete the timestamp. He didn't know that the Massachusetts Land Records portal was a client of Ether Systems. We provided their cybersecurity. At 1:12 in the afternoon, a red alert flashed on my monitor in Chicago. Security alert. Unauthorized attempt to modify immutable record. Target, Deed 49201-B, South Boston Warehouse. Source YAP. Mobile hotspot. Julian's iPhone. Action, blocked. I sighed. He was actually trying to hack a government database from his personal phone. It was like watching a toddler try to rob a bank with a crayon. My AI, which I called the Sentinel, had already traced the packet, logged the keystrokes, and recorded the screen activity. I picked up my phone. I didn't call him. I sent a text. 2. Julian, I am watching you. You just tried to access the Suffolk County Registry database with compromised credentials. That is a Class C felony. Attempted tampering with public records. I saw the delivery receipt. Read. I typed again. You were facing embezzlement charges. Now you have added forgery and cybercrime to the list. My lawyers are forwarding the IP logs to the district attorney as we speak. You have 22 hours left. Julian, and you just dug the hole 6 feet deeper. I watched the dot on the map representing his car. It pulled over to the side of the highway. He sat there for a long time. He was realizing that there were no corners left to turn. The walls were closing in, and they were made of steel. I turned back to my work. My mother was flying home to tell my father that the monster in Chicago had no heart. Julian was sitting on the side of I-90, realizing he was going to prison. And I had a conference call with Tokyo in 5 minutes. Life went on. But the countdown continued. Tuesday at noon arrived with the silent precision of a digital clock changing digits. I sat in my office in Chicago, my eyes fixed on the dedicated monitor displaying the account balance for Blue Jay Holdings. The screen was a wall of white pixels, stark and unforgiving. The balance remained unchanged. The wire transfer from Julian Hargrave had not arrived. There was no pending transaction. There was no desperate last-minute deposit. There was only 0. 12 o'clock and 1 minute, I said aloud. My voice was steady. There was no joy in it, nor was there any regret. It was simply a statement of fact. The contract had expired. The grace period was over. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the Suffolk County District Attorney's office. I had a contact there, a senior prosecutor named Eleanor who had worked with Ether Systems on a cyber fraud case the previous year. Alice, Eleanor said, her tone surprised. To what do I owe the pleasure? Do you have another algorithm for us? I have something better, I said. I am emailing you a secure file packet right now. It contains evidence of wire fraud, embezzlement, and grand larceny. The suspect is Julian Hargrave. Hargrave? Eleanor paused. As in Hargrave Logistics? That is a big name in the Harbor District. The evidence is comprehensive, I said, ignoring her comment. You will find bank statements, audio recordings of conspiracy to commit fraud, and forged invoices. The victim is the estate of Josephine Hargrave, and subsequently, Blue Jay Holdings. The amount misappropriated is $450,000. That is a significant felony count, Eleanor noted. her voice shifting into professional gear. "Is the victim willing to press charges?" "I am the owner of Blue Jay Holdings," I said. "And I am not just willing, I am insisting." "I see," she said. "I will have a detective look at this immediately, if the evidence is as solid as you say." "It is," I cut in. "It is watertight. Have a good day. Eleanor." I hung up. Then I called Marcus. "File the civil suit," I ordered, "and petition the court for an emergency injunction to freeze any remaining assets Julian might have hidden. I want him naked." "Done," Marcus said. "And the press?" "Let nature take its course," I said. "Police sirens are loud. Reporters tend to follow them." 2 hours later, the storm made landfall in South Boston. I watched it unfold on the local news feed from WBZ-TV. A helicopter shot showed the parking lot of Hargrave Logistics. It was already a scene of chaos. The drivers, who hadn't been paid in 2 weeks, were picketing at the gates. They held signs made of cardboard torn from shipping boxes. "No pay, no wheels, and Hargrave equals thieves." Then, the blue lights cut through the gray afternoon. 3 Boston police cruisers pulled up to the main entrance. The officers didn't run. They walked with the heavy, deliberate pace of men who knew the suspect wasn't going anywhere. They pushed through the line of angry truck drivers, who parted like the Red Sea, cheering as they realized what was happening. The camera zoomed in on the glass doors of the office building. Minutes later, they emerged. Julian was in the middle. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His tie was undone. His face was a mask of sheer, unadulterated terror. He looked small, shrunken inside his expensive shirt, and his hands were behind his back, secured by gleaming steel handcuffs. The flashbulbs erupted. A freelance photographer had evidently tipped off the local papers. The image was captured instantly. The scion of the Hargrave dynasty, the golden boy, being led away like a common criminal while his own employees jeered at him. I saw Julian look up at the camera for a split second. He looked lost. He looked like he was waiting for his mother to come and tell the officers that it was all a mistake, that he was a good boy, that he didn't mean it. But Mother wasn't there. Nobody was there. The anchor on the news feed was breathless. "Breaking news from the seaport. Julian Hargrave, the newly appointed CEO of Hargrave Logistics, has just been taken into custody. Sources tell us he is facing multiple charges of embezzlement and fraud. This comes amidst reports that the historic logistics company has failed to meet payroll." I turned off the volume. I didn't need to hear the commentary. The image of the handcuffs was enough. The brand, the name my father had spent 40 years polishing, was now synonymous with theft. I went back to work. I had a merger to oversee for a client in Singapore, but the phone rang at 4:30 in the afternoon. It was not my mother. It was a number I didn't recognize, with a Massachusetts area code. "This is Alice Hargrave," I answered. "Ms. Hargrave, this is Dr. Evans from Massachusetts General Hospital." A soft male voice said. My fingers paused over the keyboard. "Yes?" "Your father, Robert Hargrave, was admitted to the emergency room 40 minutes ago. He collapsed at his home." "Is he dead?" I asked. The question was clinical, devoid of panic. "No," the doctor said, sounding slightly taken aback by my tone. "It was a myocardial infarction, a heart attack, but it was mild. We have stabilized him. He has a stent in place, and his vitals are returning to normal. However, the stress." "I understand," I said. "He is alive. Yes, he is asking to speak with you. He is quite agitated. I advised against it, but he insisted." "Put him on." There was a rustling sound, the beep of monitors in the background, and then the heavy, wet breathing of a man who had just looked into the abyss. "Alice?" His voice was a ghost of the booming baritone that used to command boardrooms. It was weak, trembling, broken. "I am here." "Robert," I said. I didn't call him Dad. That title had been revoked. "They took him," he wheezed. "They took Julian. I saw it on the television in the waiting room. Handcuffs. My boy." "He broke the law," I said. That is what happens when you break the law. He is your brother, Robert cried, a sound that cracked in his throat. We are your family. How could you be so cold? I am lying in a hospital bed. Alice, my company is dead. My son is in a cell. My name is Mud, and you did this. He took a ragged breath. Why? He asked. Why are you so cruel? We were hard on you. Maybe we pushed you, but we gave you a home. We gave you an education. Why do you hate us this much? To destroy everything, it is evil. Alice, it is pure evil. I sat in my chair, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still the color of bruised iron. You think I am cruel, I said softly. You are a monster, he whispered. Hold on, I said. I want to show you something. Check your phone. I just sent you a video file. I don't want to see your... Watch it, I commanded. If you want to know why, watch it. I heard him fumbling with the phone. I had dug this file out of the cloud archives days ago. It was from a home security camera in the living room. Dated 10 years ago, it was my 22nd birthday. I narrated as I knew he was watching. Do you remember this night, Robert? I had just come home from college. I didn't have any money because you had cut me off. But I wanted to give you something. I spent 3 months knitting that scarf. I used high-grade wool. I learned the pattern from a YouTube video. On the video, a younger Alice stood in the living room, holding out a clumsily wrapped package. Robert and Victoria were sitting on the sofa, drinking wine. Julian was there too, laughing at something on his phone, in the video. Robert took the package. He opened it. He pulled out the gray wool scarf. He looked at it with a sneer of absolute disdain. I heard the audio from the video play through his phone line. Video Robert. What is this? A rag? Video Victoria. Oh, Alice. Really? You go to MIT and you come back with knitting? It looks like something a peasant would wear. Video Robert laughs, tossing the scarf onto the floor. It is useless. Just like your degree. Useless and ugly. Go take it away. Alice, it smells like wet dog. Video Alice stands there, freezing, her face crumbling. Video Julian. Maybe she can sell it on the street corner. Make a few pennies. They all laughed. The video ended. Silence stretched across the line between Chicago and the hospital room in Boston. I remember that scarf, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I found it in the trash can the next morning. You didn't even donate it. You threw it away like garbage. It was a joke, Robert stammered, his voice weak. We were just joking. No, I said. You were teaching me. You were teaching me that my effort meant nothing to you. You were teaching me that unless I brought you gold, I was worthless. You were teaching me that emotions are a weakness to be mocked. I leaned into the microphone of my phone. I am not cruel. Father, I am simply a good student. I learned the lesson you taught me. You invested coldness into me for 30 years. You invested mockery. You invested neglect. And now I am returning your investment with compound interest. Alice, please. The cruelty you feel right now, I continued, that is just the reflection of your own face in the mirror. I didn't destroy the family. Robert, I just stopped pretending it was anything other than a business arrangement, and you just went bankrupt. I hung up the phone. I didn't wait for his reply. There was nothing left to say. 10 minutes later, the notification I had been waiting for arrived. It was a filing from the United States Bankruptcy Court, District of Massachusetts, in re. Hargrave Logistics, Incorporated, petition for relief under Chapter 11. They had filed. It was their only move. With the accounts frozen, the CEO arrested, and the debts called in, they needed court protection to stop the creditors from tearing the building apart brick by brick. But Chapter 11 requires a debtor-in-possession financing plan. It requires cash to keep the lights on while they restructure, and they didn't have any cash. That meant the bank, Vanguard Ventures, had the priority position. I called Marcus again. They filed Chapter 11, I said. Convert it. You want to push for Chapter 7? Marcus asked. Total liquidation? No, I said. I don't want to kill the company. The company is actually viable if you remove the parasites running it. I want to own it. Okay, Marcus said. We can propose a debt-for-equity swap. Since Vanguard holds the primary lien of $5.1 million, and the company's assets are currently valued at less than $4 million due to the brand damage, we can effectively take 100% control. Do it, I said. But don't use Vanguard. Use the other subsidiary. Josephine Holdings? Yes, I said. Josephine Holdings. Draft the purchase agreement. We buy the bad debt. We forgive the interest penalties. And in exchange, we take full ownership of all stock, assets, and intellectual property. The current board of directors, Robert and Victoria, will be removed immediately. It will be a slaughter, Marcus said. The court will approve it in a heartbeat. It is the only way to save the jobs of those drivers. Exactly, I said. I am not destroying the company. I am saving it from them. I watched the sun begin to set over the lake. Robert was in the hospital, wondering where he went wrong. Julian was in a holding cell, trading his tailored suit for an orange jumpsuit. Victoria was likely sitting in the waiting room, realizing that her pearls couldn't buy her a way out of this. And I sat in the center of the web, holding the deed, holding the debt, and holding the future. I opened a new window on my computer. I typed in a search for knitting patterns. I looked at the image of a complex, beautiful gray scarf. Happy birthday, Alice, I whispered to myself. I closed the laptop. The hostile takeover was complete. Now, it was time to visit the ruins. The flight from Chicago to Boston took 2 hours and 15 minutes. I spent the entire duration looking out the window of the Gulfstream G650, watching the clouds shift from the iron gray of the Midwest to the crisp, cold blue of New England. I had flown this route dozens of times before, usually in the cramped middle seat of economy class, dreading the moment the wheels touched the tarmac, dreading the rental car counter, dreading the drive to the house where I was invisible. This time, there was no dread. There was only the calm, methodical focus of a surgeon scrubbing in for an amputation. The car waiting for me at the private terminal at Logan Airport was a black SUV with tinted windows. My driver, a man named Silas who doubled as my security detail, opened the door without a word. The lawyers are already at the site. Ms. Hargrave, he said. Good, I replied. Let's go. We didn't drive to the house. The house was no longer the seat of power. It was just a liability on a balance sheet. We drove to the headquarters of Hargrave Logistics, the parking lot, which days ago had been filled with striking drivers and police cruisers, was now empty. Ether Systems had secured the perimeter. We had placed private security guards at the gates. The company was in lockdown, suspended in the amber of Chapter 11 bankruptcy, waiting for the new owner to breathe life back into it. I walked through the glass doors. The lobby was silent. The receptionist's desk was empty. The air smelled of stale coffee and fear. I took the elevator to the top floor. The conference room was exactly as I remembered it from the video call, but the atmosphere was inverted. 3 days ago, my father had sat at the head of the table, barking orders. Today, that chair was empty, waiting for me. My legal team, led by Marcus, sat on the left side of the long mahogany table. They were arranging stacks of documents with precise, synchronized movements. On the right side sat the remnants of the Hargrave dynasty. My father, Robert, was in a wheelchair. He looked 10 years older than he had on Saturday. His skin was the color of old parchment, and his suit hung loosely on his frame. The stent in his heart kept his blood flowing, but his spirit had clearly flatlined. Next to him was my mother, Victoria. She wasn't wearing pearls. She was wearing a simple gray cardigan, and her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white. She looked at the table, refusing to lift her eyes. And then there was Julian. He was out on bail, posted by a bail bondsman who had demanded the title to Victoria's jewelry as collateral. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore a rumpled button-down shirt and jeans. On his left ankle, A black plastic monitoring device blinked a slow, rhythmic red light. When I walked in, the room went dead silent. The only sound was the clicking of my heels on the hardwood floor. I didn't look at them. I walked straight to the head of the table. I placed my phone on the surface, screen down. I sat. "Let's begin," I said. Marcus cleared his throat. "We are here to finalize the acquisition of assets and the restructuring of debt regarding Hargrave Logistics, Inc., and to address the personal insolvency of the guarantors. Robert and Victoria Hargrave." "Personal insolvency?" Julian croaked. His voice was rough, as if he had been screaming for days. "Dad has a pension. The house." "The house is gone. Julian," I said, cutting him off. I didn't even turn my head to look at him. I addressed the air in front of me. "The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings yesterday morning. The mortgage was cross-collateralized with the business loans. When the business defaulted, the house went with it. You have 30 days to vacate." My mother let out a small, strangled sound. The house was her identity. It was where she held her garden parties. It was where she looked down on the neighbors. Losing it was worse than death for her. "However," I continued, "I am not interested in putting elderly people on the street. It looks bad for public relations." I signaled to Marcus. He slid a thick document across the table toward them. "This is a settlement and plea agreement," Marcus explained. "It outlines a path forward that avoids a total catastrophe for your family." "Catastrophe?" Julian spat. "You already put me in handcuffs. What more do you want? Blood?" I finally turned to look at him. My gaze was clinical. "I want justice, Julian, and justice is expensive." I leaned forward. "Here's the deal. Option A. I continue with the prosecution. I hand over the full forensic audit to the district attorney. We press for the maximum sentence on all counts: wire fraud, embezzlement, grand larceny, and document forgery. Given the amount, over $450,000, and your attempt to hack a government database, you are looking at 8 to 10 years in federal prison, minimum." Julian flinched. The reality of a decade in a cage was a terror he couldn't bluff his way out of. "Option A also involves the immediate eviction of our parents," I added. "They will lose the house. They have no savings because they poured it all into the company to cover your theft. They will be destitute." I let that sink in. "Or," I said, "there is option B." "What is option B?" Father whispered. His voice was thin, barely audible. "Option B is mercy," I said. "But mercy comes with conditions." I pointed to the document. "If you sign this, I will speak to the district attorney. I will withdraw the private complaint regarding the theft from Blue Jay Holdings. I will characterize the $450,000 as a misallocated executive loan that has been repaid during the restructuring. This will downgrade the charges significantly. You will likely get probation and 2,000 hours of community service. No prison time." Julian's eyes widened. Hope, desperate and pathetic, flared in his chest. "Furthermore," I continued, looking at my mother, "I have purchased the mortgage on the family estate from the bank. I own the house now. I will allow Robert and Victoria to live there, rent-free, for the remainder of their natural lives. The utilities and taxes will be paid by my holding company." Mother looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Alice, you would do that? After everything?" "There are conditions," I said sharply. 3 of them. "Anything," she sobbed. "We will do anything." "Condition 1," I said. "Julian is removed from the company permanently. He is barred from entering the premises. He is barred from contacting any employees. And he must leave the state of Massachusetts. I don't care where he goes. Florida, Arizona, the moon, but if he sets foot within 100 miles of Boston, the deal is void, and I send him to jail." "Exile?" Julian shouted. "You are exiling me? This is my home. My friends are here." "Your friends abandoned you the second the credit card declined," I reminded him. "You have no friends, Julian. You have accomplices, and you are leaving them behind." "Condition 2," I went on. Robert and Victoria will sign a press release. It has already been drafted. Marcus slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Read it, I ordered. Father picked it up. His hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. He squinted at the text. I, Robert Hargrave, he read, his voice trembling, hereby acknowledge that the failure of Hargrave Logistics was due to the gross incompetence and financial mismanagement of my son, Julian Hargrave. I admit that I wrongfully appointed him as CEO based on nepotism rather than merit. He stopped, choking on the words. Keep reading, I said. I further acknowledge, he continued, a tear dripping onto the page, that my daughter, Alice Hargrave, is the sole reason the company remains solvent. She is the only member of this family with the integrity and skill to lead. I publicly apologize for failing to recognize her contributions and for the unjust treatment she received. The room was silent. You want us to publish this? Mother asked, horrified. In the newspaper? Everyone will see. The country club, the neighbors. Yes, I said. I want it in the Boston Globe. I want it on the company website. I want it on LinkedIn. I want the world to know exactly who did what. It is humiliation, Julian seethed. You just want to humiliate us. I want the truth, I corrected. You spent 30 years building a lie about how special Julian was. I am simply correcting the record. I won't sign it. Julian slammed his hand on the table. I won't let you destroy my reputation. I can rebuild. I can start over. You have no reputation, I snapped, my voice cracking like a whip. You are a felon with an ankle monitor. The only reason you aren't in a cell right now is because I'm feeling generous. Do not test me. Julian. I won't do it, he yelled, standing up. Mom, Dad, don't listen to her. She is bluffing. She won't put you on the street. She is your daughter. My mother looked at him. Then she looked at the document. Then she looked at me. She looked at the cold, hard reality of my face. She saw the Armani suit. She saw the power. And then she looked at her husband, a broken man in a wheelchair who would die if he was forced into a homeless shelter. She stood up. She walked over to Julian, and she placed a hand over his mouth. Shut up, Julian, she said. Julian froze. His eyes bulged. He had never heard his mother speak to him like that in his entire life. Mom? He muffled against her hand. Sit down, she hissed. And shut up. You have done enough. She pushed him back into his chair. She turned to me. Her face was gray, stripped of all vanity. We will sign, she said. Good, I said. But please, she added, her voice breaking, just protect him from prison. That is all I ask. If you sign, he stays free, I said. That is the deal. Father picked up the pen first. He didn't look at the press release again. He just signed his name at the bottom. The signature was shaky, a scrawl of defeat. Mother signed next. She closed her eyes as the pen touched the paper, as if she were signing a surrender treaty. Then, they pushed the document to Julian. Sign it, Father said. It was the first time he had spoken directly to his son since the meeting began. Sign it and get out of my sight. Julian looked at the paper. He looked at the clause where he agreed to leave the state. He looked at the admission of his own incompetence. He picked up the pen. He signed. He dropped the pen. It rolled across the table and fell to the floor with a clatter. Done, Marcus said, scooping up the papers. The press release will go out tomorrow morning. The deed transfer for the house will be processed by the end of the week. My parents sat there, looking like statues of grief. They had kept their home, and they had kept their son out of jail, but they had lost everything that actually mattered to them, their pride. Is that all? Father asked. Can we go now? Not quite, I said. I stood up. I walked over to the window that overlooked the shipping yard. I could see the rows of trucks parked in the lot. The trucks bore the name Hargrave Logistics in bold blue letters on their sides. There is one final administrative matter, I said, keeping my back to them. As the new owner of 100% of the equity, I have decided to rebrand. Rebrand? Mother asked. But the Hargrave name, it has been on those trucks for 40 years. It means quality. It means tradition. I turned around. It means fraud, I said. The Hargrave brand is toxic. No vendor will trust it. No bank will lend to it. So what will you call it? Father asked. Ether Logistics? No, I said. I am naming it after the actual founder. I am the founder, Father said, a flicker of indignation rising in his chest. I started this company with one truck in 1985. You started it, I agreed, but you didn't save it. And you didn't have the vision to see who was actually protecting it. I looked at them, my expression softening just a fraction. Not with kindness, but with a solemn reverence for the dead. I am renaming the company Josephine Holdings, I announced. The name hung in the room. My father's mouth fell open. Josephine? My sister? Yes, I said. The woman you ignored. The woman whose property Julian stole. The woman who saw my potential when you were too busy mocking my knitting. I walked back to the table and placed my hands on the leather surface. Every truck will be repainted, I said. Every letterhead will be changed. The name Hargrave will be scrubbed from the corporate registry. From tomorrow onward, this company honors the only person in this family who had a spine, and the only person who had eyes to see the truth. Alice, Mother whispered, that is a slap in the face. No, Mother, I said. It is a memorial. I looked at Julian. You stole from her, I said. Now, you will watch her name replace yours on every building in this city, every time you see a truck pass you on the highway as you drive out of town. You will see her name, and you will remember that you lost. Julian put his head in his hands. He didn't cry. He just made a low, animal noise of despair. Father looked at the table. Tears were sliding down his cheeks, dropping onto the mahogany. He wasn't crying for Josephine. He was crying because he realized that his legacy was truly, finally dead. He had been erased. You are dismissed, I said. I sat back down and opened my laptop. Slowly, painfully. They stood up. My mother pushed my father's wheelchair. Julian trailed behind them, dragging his feet, the ankle monitor bumping against his bone. They walked to the door. Alice, Father said, pausing at the threshold. He didn't look back. Yes? We are sorry. I know, I said, typing a command to authorize the press release. Being poor makes people very apologetic. Goodbye. Robert. They left. The heavy door clicked shut behind them. I was alone in the conference room. I looked at the empty chairs. I looked at the pen Julian had dropped on the floor. I took a deep breath. The air didn't smell like fear anymore. It smelled like rain. It smelled like a clean slate. Marcus, I said to the lawyer, who was quietly packing his briefcase. Yes. Alice? Order the paint, I said. I want the new logo on the water tower by Monday. Make it big. Make it bright. What color? Blue, I said. Jaybird blue. I turned back to the window. The rain was clearing. A single ray of sunlight pierced the clouds, illuminating the harbor. It was done. The empire was mine. The revenge was complete. But as I looked out at the city, at the world I had conquered, I felt a strange, quiet hollowness in my chest. I had won the war. I had crushed the enemy. But I still didn't have a family. I shook my head, dismissing the thought. I didn't need a family. I had a portfolio. And unlike a family, a portfolio never let you down. The heavy oak door had not even fully latched shut when I spoke. My voice was not loud, but it carried the acoustic weight of a gavel striking a sounding block. Wait. It was a single word, dropped into the silence like a stone into a frozen lake. My father, Robert, stopped his wheelchair halfway through the turn. My mother froze, her hand hovering over the door handle. Julian, who had been practically sprinting toward freedom, skidded to a halt. He turned around slowly, his face a mixture of exhaustion and a lingering, jittery hope. He looked like a man who had just walked through a minefield and could not believe he still had his legs. "What is it now?" Julian asked, his voice trembling. "We signed the papers, Alice. We signed the press release. We agreed to the exile. It is over." "Sit down," I said. "We are leaving," Mother said, her voice rising in panic. "The deal is done. You said if we signed, we could go." "I said the meeting regarding the restructuring of Josephine Holdings was adjourned," I corrected her, my fingers tracing the edge of the mahogany table. "I did not say I was finished with you." I reached under the table and pulled out a second file. This one was not a sleek, corporate folder like the previous documents. It was thick, bound with heavy-duty rubber bands, and stamped with a red seal that had nothing to do with my company. I threw it onto the table. It landed with a heavy, dull thud that echoed in the empty room. "Sit down." The command was absolute. Slowly, terrified by the change in my tone, they drifted back to their chairs. Julian sat on the edge of his seat, his eyes fixed on the new file as if it were a bomb. "You asked me a question earlier." "Julian," I said, standing up and walking around the table until I was standing directly behind him. "You asked if I was doing this to humiliate you. You thought I was letting you off with a slap on the wrist? Probation? Community service? A little public shame? Because of some residual familial affection? You thought I was saving you." I leaned down, whispering into his ear. "You were wrong." I walked back to my chair and pointed at the file. "Open it." Julian's hands shook so violently he could barely grip the cover. He flipped it open. The first page was not a spreadsheet. It was a flowchart, a complex web of arrows and boxes connecting bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, crypto wallets in Malta, and a series of online gambling platforms hosted on servers in Russia. "What is this?" Julian whispered. "That," I said, "is the result of the deep dive audit I performed on the $5.1 million of operating capital. You see, when I realized you were stealing from the company, I assumed it was simple embezzlement. I assumed you were just taking cash to buy watches and cars, and you were... But you were also doing something else, something much, much stupider." I tapped the page. "You were losing money on illegal offshore poker sites. That part is sad, but not surprising. But here is the problem. Julian, you were trying to win it back, and when you did win, on the rare occasions you actually got lucky, you needed a way to get that money back into the United States without triggering IRS flags." I flipped the page for him. "So, you used the Hargrave Logistics vendor accounts. You set up fake invoices from shell companies that were actually fronts for these casinos. You moved money out of the company to play, and you moved winnings back into the company disguised as refunds or service credits. You mingled clean corporate funds with dirty gambling money from unregulated, international syndicates." I looked at my father. "Do you know what that is called? Robert?" Father was staring at the chart, his face the color of ash. He knew. He was a lawyer by training, even if he hadn't practiced in decades. "Money laundering," he whispered. "Correct," I said. "Structuring, layering, and because the gambling sites you were using are tied to entities currently under sanctions by the United States Department of Treasury, it is not just money laundering." I looked at Julian, whose eyes were rolling back in his head. "It is funding organized crime. It is a federal racketeering charge. It is the kind of crime that doesn't get you probation. Julian, it gets you a mandatory minimum sentence in a maximum security federal penitentiary." "No," Julian gasped. "No, I didn't know. I just wanted to hide the transactions from Dad. I didn't know who ran the sites." "Ignorance of the law is not a defense," I said coldly. "Especially when you are the CEO." "But the deal!" Mother screamed, jumping up. She grabbed the settlement agreement they had just signed and waved it in the air. "We signed. You promised. You said if we signed this, you would withdraw the complaint. You said no prison." "Read the fine print, Mother," I said, my voice calm and deadly. I recited the clause from memory. The undersigned, Alice Hargrave, representing Blue Jay Holdings and Josephine Holdings, agrees to withdraw all civil and criminal complaints regarding the misappropriation of domestic rental income and internal corporate embezzlement. I paused. I promise not to sue him for stealing my money. I promise not to press charges for the fake roof repairs. I kept that promise. I have not called the police about the $450,000. I pointed at the thick file on the table. But this is not a crime against me. This is a crime against the United States government. This is a crime against the banking system. And I never promised to cover up a federal felony. In fact, as the owner of a company that holds government contracts, I have a legal obligation to report it. You reported him? Father choked out. I didn't have a choice. I lied. I always had a choice. I chose the nuclear option. My algorithms flag the suspicious activity. Once the system sees it, the compliance reports are automatic. If I hid this, I would be an accessory. Do you want me to go to prison for him, too? Haven't I paid enough for his mistakes? You trapped us, Julian whispered. He looked at the settlement agreement. You made us sign away the house. You made us admit I was incompetent, thinking it would save me. But you knew. You knew this whole time that the feds were coming. I knew, I admitted. I wanted to make sure the company was safe first. I wanted to make sure the house was secure for Mom and Dad. And I wanted to make sure the world knew exactly who you were before you vanished into the system. Julian stood up. He looked wild, like a trapped animal. I am leaving, he said, backing toward the door. I am leaving the country. I will go to Mexico. You can't stop me. I wouldn't do that, I said, checking my watch. Why? He snarled. Because you are going to call the cops? No, I said, smoothing the lapel of my jacket. Because they are already here. I pressed a button on the intercom. Send them in. The heavy double doors of the conference room swung open. They did not look like the local police who had arrested him earlier. These men wore dark blue windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back. They moved with a terrifying, silent efficiency. FBI. 3 agents stepped into the room. The lead agent, a tall woman with eyes like flint, walked straight to Julian. Julian Hargrave? She asked. Julian didn't answer. He made a sound like a balloon deflating. His knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the carpet. He didn't faint. His legs simply refused to hold the weight of his reality any longer. Please, he whimpered from the floor, curling into a ball. Please, Mom. Mom, help me. Stand up, the agent commanded. She hauled him to his feet. He was dead weight. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering, wire fraud, and violation of the RICO Act, she recited. She spun him around. The handcuffs clicked. It was a sharper, heavier sound than the local police cuffs. It sounded like a vault door closing. Alice, Mother screamed. She threw herself at me, grabbing the lapels of my Armani suit. Stop them. You have to stop them. You promised. You liar. You evil, hateful liar. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I looked down at her hands clutching my expensive fabric. I kept my promise, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. I saved you from the street. I saved the company. I saved your home. But I cannot save a cancer. Mother, I can only cut it out. I reached up and peeled her fingers off my suit, one by one. You said you wanted to protect him, I said. Well, he is going to a place where he will be watched 24 hours a day. He will have a roof over his head. He will have structure. In a way, I am giving him exactly what he needs. I hate you, she shrieked, collapsing into the chair my father occupied. She buried her face in his shoulder. Father sat there, staring blankly at his son being dragged toward the door. He was weeping silently, a broken king watching his prince being led to the gallows. Julian looked back at me one last time before they pushed him into the hallway. Alice, he sobbed. Alice, I'm sorry. I looked at him. I felt nothing. No triumph, no pity, just the cold satisfaction of a balanced equation. Goodbye, Julian, I said. The agents marched him out. The door closed. The room was suddenly very quiet, save for the sound of my mother's jagged breathing. I gathered my papers. I picked up my phone. "You should go home," I said to my parents. "The driver is waiting downstairs to take you back to the estate. Enjoy the house. The garden is beautiful this time of year." "Don't speak to us," Father whispered. "You are dead to us." "I have been dead to you for 30 years, I replied. "I just finally decided to bury the body." I turned and walked toward the door. "Alice," Mother called out, her voice a ragged gasp. "Are you happy? You have won everything. You have the money. You have the company. You have the power. But you have no one. You are all alone. Are you happy?" I stopped. My hand rested on the brass handle of the door. I thought about the question. Was I happy? I thought about the years of being the invisible girl, the years of watching Julian get the praise while I got the scraps, the years of building an empire in the shadows just to prove I existed. I looked at my reflection in the glass of the door. I saw a woman who was strong, a woman who was capable, a woman who owed nothing to anyone. "I am not happy. Mother," I said, without turning around. "I am solvent." I opened the door and walked out. I walked down the long corridor of Josephine Holdings. I walked past the empty cubicles that would soon be filled with new, competent employees. I walked past the portraits of my father on the wall. Knowing I would have them taken down by morning, I took the elevator to the lobby. Outside, the air was crisp. My black SUV was waiting at the curb. Silas opened the rear door. "To the airport, Ms. Hargrave?" "Yes, Silas," I said. "Take me home." I slid into the leather seat. The door closed, sealing me inside the quiet, protective bubble of my own success. My phone vibrated. I pulled it out. It was a notification from the bank. "Transaction complete. Asset transfer finalized. Hargrave Logistics. Title transfer finalized. 1404 Beacon Street. Total net worth updated." I looked at the number. It was just a number. It couldn't hug me. It couldn't tell me it was proud of me. But it would never lie to me. It would never leave me for a better offer. And it would never look at me with disappointment. I looked out the window. The sky had opened up. Rain began to streak against the tinted glass, blurring the lights of Boston into long, weeping streaks of color. It washed over the pavement, washing away the footprints of the strike, washing away the memory of the police cars, washing away the name Hargrave. I leaned my head back against the headrest and closed my eyes. The engine purred. The car moved forward, gliding effortlessly into the traffic. Leaving the ruins of my family in the rearview mirror, I was alone, and for the first time in my life, I was free. The screen faded to black. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey into the dark side of family and ambition, and I hope you enjoyed the ride. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city like Chicago, a quiet town, or somewhere across the ocean? Please drop a comment below and let me know. I love reading your stories and connecting with you. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to BitterSweet Drama Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people. Your support means the world to me and helps me bring more of these dramatic tales to life. Until next time, stay safe and watch your back. Goodbye.